Well,
Thank
we
you.
might start because we are a couple of minutes late. But hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Wilson. You've probably joined in by my Substack. I am back in Canberra. Every time I do one of these things, I'm somewhere else. I've just been on a first segment of my tour. I'm here back with mum and dad and nieces and nephews before I head off on the next leg. But joining me today is Balázs Matics, a Hungarian essayist. He writes over at the Honest Sorcerer, which is, hello, Rick Gleave, a very good friend of mine from London. He writes over at the Honest Sorcerer, and for years you wrote under that pseudonym. You didn't reveal your identity. Only recently have you kind of come out, put a face to your posts. So a few of us, I think, have sort of caught onto your work just recently because of that. You did a Substack recently with Nate Hagens as well. But just for everybody tuning in, this is Balázs Matics, and we'll get started on the interview shortly. But the reason why I was, I guess, drawn to your work is you were able to explain what was happening with energy systems within the complex systems collapse thesis. And the way that you describe the fact that we're not necessarily going to run out of fossil fuels, it's the fact that it's the energy return on investment that's at issue here. They're going to become too expensive for the market to be able to contain them and to be able to factor them into the costs of products and so on in our complex system. So I really want to talk about sort of how all of that works, but I think it's a really great time to talk about it because of everything that's happening in Iran, the Strait of Hormuz. Australia is particularly implicated, and I know you're on top of that. So is that a fair introduction? You're also, you're an engineer who specialises in, I guess, you specialise in supply chains.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so that's why sort of you've got this awareness of how energy flows around the planet and the implications when an energy source starts to wobble, hence Iran. So can you perhaps give us a bit of a rundown as to why you write a Substack? I presume you've got a full-time job and your posts are so detailed. Why did you turn to Substack to write all of this?
Well, actually, I didn't start on Substack. I started on Medium, another blog platform. Actually, it was 5 years ago, exactly 5 years ago, during the pandemic, when everybody was home and plenty of time spared due to lack of travel and lack of commuting. I had a time to just research this energy topic because I was keenly aware of the climate change situation. So I was very afraid that, okay, what will happen to us? Can we stop using oil? What will happen if we run out of oil first, then climate change hits? These type of things were swirling in my head. And I started researching the topic in more detail. And I came across a paper from the International Energy Agency explaining how much resources we actually do need to replace fossil fuel infrastructure. And it was a huge number of copper, cobalt, and all these exotic metals which are needed to build solar panels, batteries, and everything else. And that put, a nagging feeling inside me that, hey, this might not pan out. So this could be a huge issue for us later in the future. And I started, dig deeper and deeper into the topic. Then I realized that this is a whole scam, so to say. So so climate change is very much real. It's very much happening. It's very much caused by fossil fuels. But the solutions are not nearly adequate to address the situation, nor to keep our civilization going for much too long at this level of consumption. And this started me, writing this type of blogging and trying to get rid of these thoughts and trying to collect my thoughts in a more organized manner. So it was more like a writing therapy for me at the start. And then 2 years went on with writing. First started with 8 subscribers for half a year. I didn't care, so I just kept writing, and subscribers just kept coming and coming and coming. But then all of a sudden, in my previous platform, the growth stopped. The platform has stagnated. I couldn't collect more readers and things like that. And then I heard about Substack and changed to Substack. And then things got simply exploded there. So it was a much bigger audience, a much bigger visibility for my work. And then I really started to dig into these topics. And based on these years of research, it was not really hard to write these topics because you have so many good open source material available, open source newspapers about energy dedicated to energy. So this is the wonder of the internet, that any type of topic you are developing into, you might easily find five good news outlets which cover that topic and go into very big details. And then it's actually, the stuff is writing itself, because history is playing out in front of our eyes, and the whole story is writing itself. I'm just the guy typing it into the computer. It's really crazy.
Yeah. I wrote about all of this, and I finished my book over a year ago. And I was sort of thinking that what I was writing about would play out in the next 5 to 10 years, and all the timelines have been brought forward. Life has become very much a self-referring phenomenon. And I'm just trying to get this book out so that it can remain relevant. This is as a print book. It existed as a serialization on Substack first. So complex complex systems collapse is obviously extremely complex, and you come at it from all the angles. You're very aware of all the complex systems that make up the complex system that is our civilization, but you very much focus on sort of the fossil fuels system, the energy system. And I'm just wondering if you can, I guess, explain, as well as the supply chain system, the two sort of are interconnected. I'm wondering if you can perhaps explain why it is that you feel that collapse is probably going to be most probably determined by one of those two systems.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this up, because this is the crux of the issue. So this is at the heart of the issue. So for those of us not familiar with my work, basically my key thesis is that this is a diesel-powered civilization. It always was and always will be. So there is no change in that for now. So while you can change your gasoline car to an electric vehicle, or while you can switch to renewables or solar panels in your roof and switch out some of the electricity from the grid, you cannot switch out diesel from the system. And diesel is a product of fossil fuels, especially crude oil. And it has a fixed ratio which can be produced at. So only a fixed ratio of oil can be turned into diesel, and it cannot be substituted with anything else. It's a very dense and very powerful fuel, and it powers basically all those big, huge machines which are carrying the stuff around the country, like huge trucks. But it also drives the mining machines, the excavators and the dumpers and all those huge mining equipment. It also powers the agricultural equipment, all of them without exception. So it's actually driven by diesel. And we are actually eating diesel for dinner, because actually we are using these huge machines to grow crops for us, harvest crops, deliver crops to the factory where they turned into other meals, which is again delivered to the supermarket on a diesel truck. So everything is driven and worked by diesel, and even construction is actually done by diesel. So those huge cranes, those huge machines building the roads and houses, everything is powered by diesel. And if the availability of this fuel decreases, then everything goes.
Yeah, very significantly, the machinery, the infrastructure, like the work required to build the wind turbines and the solar panels, the machinery required to dig up the rare earth minerals that are required to build the solar panels, the batteries, to do the green transition, the green economy transition. It's powered by diesel. And at this stage, nothing else can do it. Like, it's diesel and diesel only. So that's the point that you make, is that the transition is so reliant on diesel.
Yeah, and this is why I say there is no energy transition, only addition. So we can add these solar panels and wind turbines on top of the existing energy infrastructure, but we cannot replace it. So I cannot replace diesel nor any other energy source with solar panels and wind turbines. First, they are intermittent. Okay, we can solve it with batteries, for example, but you cannot put these heavy batteries on a mining truck. There are experiments doing that, so it's a pretty much actively researched area. But all the experiments came to the conclusion that batteries wear out very soon, because mining is a 24-hour business. It's done 24 hours, 7 days a week. It's a non-stop business. The prime reason being that mining equipment is very, very expensive, especially battery-powered mining equipment is very, very expensive, and you have to literally sweat your assets, which means that you have to use your assets all the time in order to make up for their huge upfront cost. and this is only works by working 24 hours a day. And then this negates the whole idea that we will use solar panels to power mining equipment. But even if we would like to switch to a battery electric mining truck, we would first have to get the power grid out there. And Australia is a huge country, but any other country like Russia is a huge countries, or North America, with huge distances not covered by the power grid, because it's centered around population centers and not around mining places, which are out there in the mountains. So basically, this is why we are not switching over to anything but diesel.
Yeah, and I mean, it's this kind of timing issue as well. A lot of people talk about, but yes, look, technology will solve all of these problems. Human ingenuity will get to a point where we can switch out these things. But yes, will it do it in time before we kind of overstep all those planetary boundaries, and including the climate system, the climate heating system? And so all of these factors are rarely considered all at once, because it is so complex, and very few people are able to talk about it in that sort of complex way. One of the points that you really flesh out very heavily, and before we get on to the Iran piece, which I think a lot of people are going to be really interested to hear your take on everything there, one of the really big points that you explain so well, and for those of you who have joined a little late, I really do credit Balázs's work with for explaining to me the fact that we're not going to run out of fossil fuels. This is not the issue. We will be able to dig deeper to extract, sort of harder to get fossil fuels in all different ways. The issue is the energy return on investment. So the economic factor here is what is going to make fossil fuels increasingly prohibitive. So on the one hand, the switcheroo out to a so-called green economy is not possible, given the parameters I just explained. But at the same time, a diesel and fossil fueled future is also not possible. So can you explain that sort of kind of irony, that it's actually going to be economics that's going to bring down the fossil fuel economy?
Yeah, exactly. And behind economics, there is real things. So there are real things like steel pipe, which is required to drill wells, and tons of it are required because it's cased in concrete and left in the well. So those steel pipes cannot be recovered, and steel is made by coal, and coal has to be dig up by diesel machines and then carried by a diesel train into in a factory. Yeah, so it's everything revolves around diesel and revolves around energy. And if you think about, oil wells, just, have you seen, a regular water well being drilled? You see huge drilling machines going there, powered by diesel, and then drilling wells for days on end, for weeks, because it's very deep. You have to drill very, very deep. Then you have to carry on site a lot of sand, a lot of water, because most of the new wells are fracked wells, which means that you have to pump water and sand underneath the soil so that it fracks open the cavities and then lets oil flow. But then even after you finish drilling that well, you have to still use a pump jack or another equipment which is pumping oil out of the ground, which also takes energy to operate. And if you're in a remote area, you have to generate that electricity with diesel generators, for example. So then there goes diesel again. And so basically, when you are going deeper and deeper, or when you are going further and further away from civilization in search for fossil fuels, you are using more and more diesel to do that. And this is going to be the economic bottleneck on the whole stuff, because as you have seen in the recent weeks and months, diesel prices have shot through the roof, because there is no more diesel which can be made out of the existing amount of fossil fuels. Biodiesel simply won't cut it, because it has an even lower energy return on investment, because you have to sow the fields with soybeans, then you have to put artificial fertilizer on, then you have to harvest it, bring it to a factory where it will be cooked and then made into diesel. So that's actually an even worse proposition to continue with that. So basically, if you just looking at the energetics of the whole situation, even without counting any money in this, or even if I'm working with dollars or anything else, you just count the energy going inside the system and going outside the system. It's worsening and worsening by year. So, for example, in the 1950s, it took 1 barrel of oil to drill out 100 barrel of oils. So that's going to be that was a huge boost to the economy, because
Yep.
barely anything had to be reinvested. Just 1% had to be reinvested into drilling more wells. But now, in case of shale oil, for example, it's well below 10, which means that you get 10
So
times
one
as
barrel,
less. Yeah.
10 barrels. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So one barrel produces 10 barrels. Is that what you're saying?
That's the best case, but in regular shale wells, it's maybe 5 or 4 barrels for 1 barrel invested, and for the whole oil industry, it's below 14, I believe. So that's the number currently, but it's deteriorating by the year. So each and every year, as old wells are running out, which produce more oil by just simply by pumping, those wells are running out, and you have to be re-drilled with more technology involved. Technology means more energy use. So that's the nature of the thing.
And the problem is our entire civilization is built, as you say, on fossil fuels, particularly diesel. Like the whole thing at the moment runs on it. And it was sort of established as that kind of a civilization at a time when we priced the fossil fuels at a very, very low price. And so the entire system is predicated on these almost free fossil fuels. Now we have a situation where the prices are going through the roof, and so the whole system cannot hold. And the repercussions of all of that in all kinds of directions are huge. So I think that probably brings us neatly to what's happening in Iran. And you've written a number of posts in the last month or two, since late February, um, on what's happening over there. And it really does, it's kind of exhibit A for what you're talking about. Can you explain your thesis on why the US and Israel attacked Iran in late February? Why has this war come about, in your
Mm.
opinion?
There are many, many, many theories about this one, and all of them can be true at the same time. So these are not mutually exclusive theories. But one of them is actually trying to explain the situation by a remote distance or a distance how to say blockade of China, because the main competitor to the United States is actually China. So trying to choke off the energy from China is the best way to keep it below in terms of GDP, below the United States. So that could be one explanation. The other one is to helping Israel, and all sorts of explanations are flying around the internet. Actually, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day why it happened or why it has been started. The thing is that it cannot end. And that's the biggest situation right now. That it looks like we are in a quasi equilibrium which cannot simply be resolved easily, because neither side can accept the other side's proposals. It's basically a no talk situation. All
Mm-hmm.
talks have been suspended during the weekend, so there is basically no talk, just a double blockade, trying to blockade each other out. And at the end of the day, it's not the United States who is suffering the most, but Australia and other Asian countries who are immensely dependent on fossil fuels from the Gulf, as well as fertilizer, which is also produced from natural gas.
Yeah, and urea and so on. But through, I guess, through your lens, you're seeing it now primarily a global issue of oil and energy. And this is an incredible energy stress, which has been predicted for quite some time. And in fact, I think a lot of energy futurists predicted that it would happen in the Strait of Hormuz. And I think you and Nate have been writing about that for some time. But a lot of energy futurists have been saying if a war were to break out in Iran, that would very potentially drive the cost of a barrel of oil to over $150 a barrel. And the consensus is the economy will collapse once it hits that point. And it's been hovering up, down for a bit. But in the long run, I think a lot of people are saying it will surpass 150. Some people are saying $200 a barrel. Can you talk, I guess, fairly specifically about the implications of even if it's a short-term blockage, Because I think there's talk that it might open up again. It opened up briefly, supposedly. A lot of damage has been done because that supply chain is going to be delayed. So a country like Australia and a lot of Asia, we're going to be hit by this in a few months' time. Can you explain, if you can, and it's a lot, the implications of this blockage to the sort of the energy supply chain around the world and how this is going to shoot out in all kinds of directions? And you've posed the question, is what's happening in Iran the kind of trigger point for collapse? Is it the ruination of our civilization? So perhaps if you can answer even outright by saying, do you think it is the trigger that is not going to be reversible, and is it going to spell the end of our civilization?
It can be interpreted as the first step towards that goal, if that's the goal, so to say. So if it's not going to end the civilization, I believe it's not. I'm, let's say, 80% sure that it's not going to end the civilization within the year. So it's not. It will not cause global collapse.
It's going to be that collapse is always going to be slow. You've
Mm.
really stressed that in all of your work. Yeah, I think you've said it's never going to be like the movies. It's going to be a very slow at first sort of process, and then it'll speed up. And I think that is the consensus worldwide on things, and it's certainly how things are playing out. But yeah, bearing all of that in mind, how do you think this is going to? What are the repercussions?
Yeah, so the first case is we have to differentiate between real oil prices and the market price of the oil as traded in the futures market. Because when you see WTI oil price or Brent oil price, it's a
Yeah.
futures market, which means that you make a contract to be delivered 2 or even 3 months from now. But usually it's 1 or 2 months from now. So the market estimates that oil will be available in 1 or 2 months' time, anytime the strait reopens, and nobody wants to be stuck in a situation when they bought oil at such a high price. I'd say $150. The strait reopens, and then the market is flooded with oil, so they don't want to end up owning this kind of stuff bought for $150. So the market price is artificially kept low. But it doesn't mean that the real price of oil is not haven't surpassed 150 already. It did. Actually, the real price of oil is the spot price, which means that what is the price you have to pay right now. If you want to buy oil today, the spot price is well above 150. In some cases, 180. So it's crazy. It's all over the place. So while the markets are relatively calm and I have to say delusional, because the strait will not be reopened in 1 month's time. It's going to last much longer than that. And even if it is reopened tomorrow, ships will take even a month or two to arrive to the Gulf, even to carry the stuff back to Australia or back to Asia, which means that at least for 3 months, even if we open the strait tomorrow, if for 3 months there will be still no oil available on the market, it's going to take a huge time to recover from this damage which has been done. So what we have to deal with now is an existential crisis, basically, for many countries, not only in case of diesel fuel or any kind of other fuels, but in case of urea, as you mentioned, this artificial fertilizer, which is required to increase crop yields. And if you consider that we are looking into a year where we have a super El Nino possibly, or just a plain strong El Nino, which is already a huge problem for agriculture, then it's going to be a combined effect. Even 15%, 20% of food production could be gone by the end of the year. It's crazy. So for especially in countries like in Africa or in Latin America, this could be a devastation. So it could even lead to some civil uprising, Arab Spring 2.0, but for basically half of the world. So which is not self-sufficient in fertilizer. And Australia is unfortunately not self-sufficient from fertilizer. 30% is imported into Australia, which means that crop yields will fall there as well. But since Australia is a net exporter of food, which means that they might be cutting back on exports first and not let people starve. But in the UK, for example, which is importing 40% of its food, this is going to be a huge problem. So while for the West and for the wealthy part of the world, this is going to look like as a price increase. Price increases always mean that it's actually a demand destruction somewhere else, which means that somebody goes hungry just because you bought your milk or bought your bag of flour at a double price, for example. That means that those double prices cannot be paid by an African working class people, or even in Latin America. They will simply not be able to buy the food products, and they will have to go hungry in many cases, which means huge political destabilization and huge inflation for the West.
Well, for those of you who've joined a little late, I'll just remind you we're talking to Balázs Matics, who's a
Mhm.
Hungarian engineer, but he specialises in supply chains, and has a special interest in the way that in energy stressors in the in the complex system setup of our civilization, and has been writing a lot recently about what's happening in Iran. Balazs, you talk about you write about Australia quite a lot, and I think, if I have this right, it's because Australia relies on diesel to produce the fairly substantial proportion of the various rare earth minerals and substances that are required to be shipped over to China and elsewhere, um, to produce the various, well, green economy products, but a lot of other things, a lot of other technological products. So, yeah, why your special interest in Australia? Maybe you can just sort of talk about what you're seeing in terms of further down the line in the supply chain kind of collapse picture.
Yeah, Austria is a special place because its mining output is enormous. So Australia is producing, I don't know, it was for 49% of all the lithium mined on the entire planet Earth, and I believe it was 38% of iron ore, 25% of aluminum ore, which is basically bauxite. It's called bauxite. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a huge mining. It has a huge mining potential, which means that if diesel is choked off because it has to be rationed to produce food, because that's ultimately the goal of the economy, to produce food for everyone, then it means that the mining industry has to go, in a COVID style lockdown, which means that there will be no aluminum produced, no iron produced, no nothing. So that means that China will not get its raw materials. It will not be able to produce the solar panels because aluminum is used as a framing for solar panels and the holding structure. It will not
Mm-hmm.
be able to produce electric cars as well because there is a lot of aluminum in electric cars due to its low weight and high strength. But also there will be not enough iron to produce so much, bridges and roads and tunnels and things like that. So the whole Chinese industry will be severely hampered by this situation in Australia. They will look for other suppliers in Africa as well. But hey, where does Africa get its fuel from? Guess what? from the Middle East. So
Yeah.
African miners are already suffering mightily from this situation. So it's going to be a no-win situation for everyone, especially not for Australia because it will lost its much of its exports. Its export revenue is going to plummet.
Yeah.
But also
Yep.
for China, who will not be able to produce as much stuff as it used to.
Yeah. And then, of course, the ripple on effect around the world because
Yeah.
it's a absolute global system now. Um, I am not watching or listening or hearing politicians, our leaders, actually talking in these terms at all. And in fact, I would say that in Australia, having been here just a couple of months um, since the strait effectively got blocked, um, I'm really not seeing people being overly concerned. They're still able to, in the main, get petrol and diesel. There's a number of regional suppliers where you can't get petrol from time to time, but that's mostly because of people who are hoarding and hoarding fuel. But what is your sense? Are leaders just being in denial about this, or do they not really understand the repercussions of it? Which way is it? What's your sense
Mm.
on things?
Yeah, it's a political, very unpopular topic because no one wants to tell their voting populace that we are going to ration fuel. So
Mm,
that's a nightmare scenario. But actually, we are in a war economy. So this is World War III. It's just not as intensive as World War II was, but it's a world war. What we are
yeah,
seeing right now, and it has terrible repercussions for all of the countries around the world. Even if they are not participating by sending soldiers, it still has many repercussions. So it's in economic terms, it's surely a World War type of situation. And then what comes with wars, rationing, and admitting this is a terribly unpopular topic because the entire West and even in the rest of the cultures are built around this myth of progress that we will grow forever and the economy will grow forever and everybody will be happy and super fine. But it's not. It's not going to be fine. And the most thing they are afraid of, especially in the US and in other Western economies, is the crash of the stock market. So if there is a panic around rationing fuel, oh my God, that's going to be bad for the economy, I must sell my stocks, then this is the nightmare of politicians, because then there will be nobody supporting them, not even
Mm.
the voting populace, but not even the billionaires who will lose money on the stock market. So everybody will be against them. So the best interest of all politicians around the world is to keep this mirage, type of false economy afloat, that, oh, everything is fine, GDP is going to be fine, oh, growth will be not 4%, just 3% this year. So this type of balmy messages, which, intended to soothe the mood of the public, but it's not the truth. The truth is that it's going to be tough, especially during the summer.
Yes. And I think the thing is that they're sort of kicking the can down the road, and some of the repercussions won't be felt within the election cycle. So they're a bit like, let's just leave this to the next person who
Exactly.
um,
Let's hope that it will last till the next person comes to office.
so what's your take? I mean, I'm being asked this all the time. How long do you think it'll be before we actually feel the real pain of this? And I'm talking middle class, upper middle class people, the top 1% in the world. When are they going to start feeling it? I mean, flights, for instance, in Australia are super expensive unless you're prepared to fly through the Middle East, and they've been slashed,
Mhm.
but you don't know if you'll actually get on a flight. When do you think this is all going to hit? And I appreciate it'll be different timings for different types of products.
Hmm. Well, first, as you mentioned, flight's going to be very expensive, but also food is going to be very, very expensive. So prepare for another a round of food inflation, and it's already a huge issue for many people in the West. I just heard a metric that 70% of Americans are worried to pay their bills. I mean, food and healthcare and other type of bills. So this is going to be a huge worry for many citizens around the world. And this is going to take back voluntary consumption, like the consumption of I don't know, extra items like buying a new car or buying a new TV set or buying something new. This is going to be severely hit when
Mm,
the crisis really arrives. And by the way, we will not have the raw material to do that anyway, so we will not produce anything. But then, if we are not producing that much stuff, that much TV set, that much ovens, that much electric goods, then it means that people will have to be fired, because there is no more demand for this type of stuff, because food prices are elevated. People don't have the money to spend on this type of stuff, so they will have to be fired, which means that those people who are fired either going to be paid by the government to stay alive, hopefully,
yeah,
or they just have to give up a lot of consumption, which means that a further round of firings, because if the fired people who are not able to buy the goods anyway will consume even less, then consumption will fall further, and then more people will have to be fired. And this is what exactly happened during the Great Depression. This is why it
yeah,
was very, very hard to escape the Great Depression in the 1930s, that this round of firings created a self-reinforcing feedback loop, which ended up, getting rid of 30% of the workforce or things like that. So it was a crazy period, and it was only World War II which ended it. But it's actually not was the war, but it was actually the scaling up of U.S. oil production, which actually ended the great economic depression in the 1930s. But since there is nothing else in the wings waiting to replace the lost barrels of oil, there is nothing new discoveries waiting to be just tapped, and then which will replace Hormuz. Nothing will replace the oil coming from there. This will be a permanent damage. So we will have to prepare for a permanent, not shock, because this is not a shock. It's a permanent step down in economic activity.
so what's your take on what we should be doing?
Hmm. Well, if I were in the government, so let's start on the government level, I would be incentivizing, biofarming a lot, and stop biofuels at all, because biofuels take up a lot of fuel and a lot of farmland. So that has to be stopped immediately. It's not helping the economy at all. It has a very low energy return investment, so it will definitely not help the situation. So instead of growing biofuels, we should be growing more crops, or even letting people to grow crops themselves, dividing up those huge fields, even buying back those huge fields, dividing up between people, and then let them learn how to grow crops in a biologically sound manner. I know it sounds crazy,
That
and
doesn't crazy at all, but it's going to take a while for crops to
yes,
bloom. So, I mean, I think what you're talking about, we're going to be hit with this within a couple of months, and certainly within a year or two. It's going the reverberations. I think people listening can hear the reverberations around the world as people lose jobs, infrastructure starts to crumble, fragmentation. I'm thinking of white collar men losing their jobs. Domestic violence dialing up. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on. The house of cards comes down. So yeah, getting people to sort of, open up fields so that we can grow our own food more locally. Because, I'm thinking in Australia, I've got family on the other side of the country. The diesel cuts means they're going to be really, situation's going to be very precarious in terms of food availability. So I understand that this needs to be done. It'll probably be too little too late, but it still has to be done. Would you
yeah,
agree
and
with?
this is what the an immediate ban on how to say biofuels could help a lot, because I believe in the US it's 30% of the food crops are actually going into biofuels. So that
Yeah.
could be a huge relief, and it can be done immediately from day one to day two. Ban producing biofuels, and
Hmm.
all the crops have to be sold on the market for food.
Hmm.
These are soybeans and corn, I believe. But that's a huge staple crop for many people around the world. So they would be happy to eat that instead of burning it in their cars. So that's actually, even if you think about biofuels, it's just 10% or 7% of the fuel in terms of diesel. So it's not really helping much at all. This will not solve the situation. But also, the other thing which could help is rationing, even rationing food if necessary. So that these type of measures cannot be avoided. This will happen. So this is coming,
And
and there is no way around it.
given that we're all into sort of looking back to the past and nostalgia, I mean, the healthiest that the Brits have ever been is during the rationing period during World War II. It's also the happiest
See,
they ever, right? And equally in America, America had an uptick in health results during the sort of the rationing period. So, a leader could probably sell that in from as a
probably in Europe it can be sold. I don't know if it can be sold in the US. Probably not, but in Europe it can be sold.
it's familiar. It's recent history for I think Europeans, and I certainly noticed that um, in living in France. The French are kind of open to the idea of having to do collective things like that. I mean, dot 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 the benefits of socialism, or at least keeping vestiges of it. What about at an individual level? And I'm loath to say that because part of the reason we're in this fix is because of individualism, and not a
Hmm.
collective way of thinking. That said, I'm imagining a lot of people who have tuned in here are sort of wanting to know what timelines are we talking about and when should they be doing what.
Hmm.
Um, I know George Monbiot in the UK has been talking about having 3 months worth of food stockpiled. He said in the long term it's not going to make a big difference, but it'll lessen the chaos when things really hit. So the less people sort of rushing to the supermarket, ripping stuff from the shelves, when the crisis really, really becomes apparent, the better. So he's sort of just quietly stockpiling, some tinned food, some food they'd eat anyway. And he sort of said he feels a bit cringe about it, but he realizes that it is with a collective kind of care in mind. But is there anything you would add to that? I mean, 3 months isn't going to make the difference, but it'll
Yeah,
reduce chaos.
that's the situation here. This is a problem created by governments and not created by individual people. So this is a result of a series of bad decisions and a series of inaction by government entities. And it's all around the world. It's not just picking on one government. It's every government has basically
Yeah,
failed us in this regard. So it's a series of issues which can be solved only at the government level by just stepping up as a government and doing your job, like
yeah.
trying to get your act together and act as a government. But since it's not happening, people can do piling up food, but that's again sounds like hoarding, which is a
Mm,
very bad word. But
mm.
anyway, it's having a few weeks of food. It's a very good idea, because if there is a sudden shortage of something, you can at least have something in your pantry and cook something out of it. That's always a good idea. always a very good idea to stock up on medicine. So if you are, especially on insulin, if you have problems with blood sugar, so that could be a good idea. Also on blood pressure relievers and things like that, because the medicine supply chain will be severely affected by this, because many of the medicine is coming from fossil fuels, basically, and also delivered by fossil fuels. So it's going to be a huge problem, because many of the medicines are produced in India and China, or the precursors of these medicines are produced there. And then if they are hit with a severe rationing situation, then it's going to be a problem to get these type of medicines. So it's also a very good idea to slowly stock up, not panic buying stuff, because that leads to shortages immediately. But just buying one box extra or one prescription extra at every prescription cycle. So it's just gradually building up the stock without causing panic in the market. So that's always a good idea. But anything more than that, maybe if you have a garden, just grow more vegetables. But if you count how much vegetables you eat, or how much posies or anything you
A
eat,
home
it's
garden's
not
not
going to be enough anyway. So there has to be a government solution to this one. So you have to ask your representative to to produce a solution.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know that there's a place in the world that's actually working effectively at the moment. Can I ask? We haven't got much time left. I've sort of about to go over the allotted time that I was able to get from you, but timing. When do you think this is really going to be felt in various parts in the world?
It's very hard to tell, so I don't want to go into predictions in this regard, because things are very fluid at the moment. So there are shipments of oil coming from all around the world, and trying to solve the situation, plug the holes. But eventually, these type of reserves will run out in 1 or 2 months' time. It's very hard to tell, depending on the country where you live. So it's
But it's soon. It's a matter of
but
months.
soon it's not years away. So it's definitely by the summer we will see some severe issues, but by the autumn it's going to be very severe, I believe.
And ripple on a whole round of crops without fertilizer. The ripple
Yeah.
on will be felt exponentially, I think, in coming years. Listen, I don't know if I can say thank you so much for talking us through this. I mean, I'm very grateful for the explainers, and I think one of the things that people like yourself, Nate Hagens, and myself can do is we need to get people aware of these issues. The more that we can actually have people understanding what's coming, the less likely people will panic, and smarter decisions can be made. So I really appreciate all of your work in this realm. And for those who've tuned in a little late, I have been speaking to the Honest Sorcerer. That's how he's been known up until recently, but he's now revealed his name, because I suppose the times are such that these things, it's like urgency brings a lot of things out and surfaces a lot of things. So Balázs Matics, you can find him at the Honest Sorcerer. I will post this video tomorrow, and I will refer or link everybody to a couple of the articles you've written on Iran, but also about sort of there's no new economy coming. That's a recent article that you wrote, I think, last week or the week before, that explains a lot of the issues we've discussed here. And I encourage everybody to subscribe at the Honest Sorcerer to do a deep dive into this kind of stuff, and to also stay abreast of what's going to be coming. Is there anything else I've missed? Is there anything you wanted to add in there?
No, thank you. It was a very comprehensive overview of my work, and thank you very much for the very clever questions, because these are the relevant questions we have to think about, and all politicians should be thinking about all the time. Okay, how do we going to manage this situation? This has to be managed. Without this being managed, this is going to be chaos. So this is why we have governments, to manage these type of situations. And don't be afraid if there is a energy lockdown or there is rationing. This is part of the solution. This has to be done. There is no other way around it.
If we can all talk about it with neighbours and friends, this idea of rationing and austerity measures, this is what, I mean, we live in an anomaly. The last 50 years is not normal. And we've got to actually normalise that. So that's sort of work that I think everybody can do, is normalise the fact that this kind of stuff does happen periodically throughout history, and this is probably going to be a particularly bad one, because there's nowhere we can decamp to, because this is going to be global, and the supply chains mean that the ripple-on effect is going to be very, very unknown. But thank you so much for your time. You're over in Hungary. Please go and start your day. Speaking from the future, it's a good one.
Thank
And
you.
I'll see you on Substack soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Bye.
Bye-bye.